Hey guys, Political Junkie 2414 here, and welcome back to my next election prediction video. So, yesterday, of course, we did my updated look for the 2022 US Senate elections as of mid-September. Today is September 18th, 2022. Happy Sunday, everyone. Today, I'm going to be doing my updated prediction for the gubernatorial elections that are taking place this year. We do these every 2 weeks, and we're getting really close to the midterms, just 2 months or less than 2 months away now. And yeah, let's just get right into it. Democrats are doing really well. You know the gig. Roe v. Wade's going to help Democrats. And yeah, I think I've said that enough times already. So let's just get right into the prediction. So we're going to start by filling out the safe Democratic and Republican states that pretty much have no chance of going to the opposition party. Republicans do have many more than Democrats. I will mention a couple of them as we go through. First of all, actually, forgot. So yeah, you can see that New York is no longer safe, and I will explain that in a minute. But as you can see, Democrats only have 4 safe states now. California, very solid for Gavin Newsom, actually 5. Hawaii going to be very solid for Democrats. Illinois, J.B. Pritzker, I think, will win by over 15 points. Darren Paley is not a good candidate, and I do think that Pritzker may expand on his margin from 2018 just because he's not up against a Republican incumbent and Roe v. Wade's going to help him. But Massachusetts and Maryland are currently held by Republicans who are both leaving office. Larry Hogan in Maryland, Charlie Baker in Massachusetts. Republicans have nominated very extreme candidates in these two states, and they are going to flip back to the Democrats. Simply based on their partisan nature and the fact that, Hogan and Baker are no longer on the ballot. And, polarization is going to help Democrats anyway, so those two states are safe. Of course, Maryland, we have Dan Cox, the very extreme Republican nominee, and Massachusetts, Jeff Deal was just nominated by the Republican Party for governor. So, yeah, that's going to be it for the safe states for Democrats. For Republicans, I will point out Oklahoma because there have been polls there that show the race getting relatively close. Same with South Dakota, and actually, an internal poll in South Dakota showed Kristi Noem only up by 3 points, which is pretty surprising, but I still do expect, Noem to win overwhelmingly. It's South Dakota. She's not going to lose. I think that poll was probably just to get Republicans to panic. Maybe she's having, a bit of a fundraising debacle. I'm not exactly sure what the situation in South Dakota is. Maybe it'll be likely. I could see Oklahoma being likely. I know that sounds crazy, but Joy Hoffmeister is a good candidate for the Democratic Party. And she can very well, she's not going to win, obviously, but Kevin Stitt is an unpopular governor, and her more conservative positions, I think, will help her in the state of Oklahoma. I think, I could see myself putting the state in the likely column, but I want to wait for a little bit more data and, for polls that have less undecideds. If you go to 538 here, you go to the Oklahoma polls. They have their average has Kevin Stitt only up by 12 points. Oklahoma can governor's elections can be pretty competitive. There have been a couple of polls that show Stitt only narrowly up against Joy Hoffmeister, so that is interesting. And I think, Hoffmeister will do a lot better than an average Democrat would in Oklahoma. She was a former Republican. She's the current superintendent of Oklahoma, and she switched to the Democratic Party. So I think that Oklahoma is an interesting race, but it's still going to go to Kevin Stitt by a pretty large margin, over 15 points, unless we see some more polls that indicate otherwise. But Democrats are not flipping Oklahoma this year. Iowa and Ohio, Kim Reynolds in Iowa is facing off against Deidre DeJear, who does not really seem to be running a very effective campaign. I do think that the Senate election is going to be more interesting to watch between Chuck Grassley and Michael Franken. Not that Franken can defeat Grassley, but that the margin might be a little bit closer. In Ohio, Mike DeWine is going to cruise to re-election against Nan Whaley. Ohio really has reelected its Republican governors by margins in the past, and I think that this year that trend will continue. Nan Whaley is an okay candidate. I think she's underrated, but I do think that she really has no chance at winning. She could make this race likely, but I mean the Libertarian, the Independent, that was splitting the vote with DeWine dropped out. So yeah. Oh, and in Vermont and New Hampshire, Phil Scott in Vermont and Chris Sununu in New Hampshire, very liberal Republican governors. They are going to sort of their re-elections just like they did in 2020, 2018, and when they were first elected in 2016. So yes, that's it for all of these safe states. First, we're going to go into the likely states that which are going to go to either party by from 5 to 15 percentage points. Of course, safe states are states that are going to go to that are going to go to either party by over 15 points. But likely states are going to go to the party. The margin is going to be between 5 to 15 percentage points. And yeah, we're going to get right into it. The first likely state I have, and you might be surprised to see this, is New York. Now, I'm not saying that Kathy Hochul really is in any danger of actually losing re-election, but new polls coming out of the state do suggest that she might win by under 15%. I do not believe the Trafalgar poll that only has her up by, what was it, 4%? I think that that's complete insanity, really. But 530 only has Hochul up by 13. There have been polls that show the race fairly close. And Republicans have done fairly well in governor elections in New York in the past. I think Hochul is going to be dragged down by the scandals of Andrew Cuomo, even though, she really didn't have anything to do with it, from my understanding. Lee Zeldin is a good candidate, though, and I think while he's not going to be able to win, New York City is going to turn out heavily for Hochul. I think he'll do very well in upstate New York, enough so to get the margin under 15 percentage points. The next likely state we have for Democrats is Colorado. Not a lot to talk about here. Jared Polis is going to easily win his reelection, but I do think it's going to be under 15 percentage points. The Senate race is going to be a lot more interesting between Michael Bennet and Joe Aldea. Yeah, Republicans are just not focusing on the governor's race. Colorado's become a very blue state. Jared Polis won by a substantial margin in 2018, and he's going to do the same again, probably close to 15 points, but I think it'll be a little bit under that. The next two likely states for Democrats we have, first is Connecticut, and second is Rhode Island. Connecticut, Ned Lamont is running for re-election in a state that usually has close governor elections. In 2018, it was actually a fairly close race between Lamont and Bob Stefanowski. And Stefanowski is running again, and you would think, well, since this is supposed to be a redder national environment, you could see Stefanowski winning, right? Well, the problem for him is that the polling data hasn't really been too favorable to him. Connecticut, is a state that, Lamont is more popular now and more well known than he was 4 years ago. And, Richard Blumenthal being on the ballot is going to help. Lamont, I really don't see any chance of this state flipping. In a best case scenario, Stefanowski could win, but he just does not have the same energy he had 4 years ago. In Rhode Island, Dan McKee just won his primary, and some people have moved it down to lean D because of that. I think though that it's going to be likely D. Even though McKee is a very unpopular governor, and Rhode Island is a state that's incrementally getting more and more conservative. I think that it would have been a worse situation for Democrats had they kicked McKee out, because as we have seen, when you kick out an incumbent governor or president, even though it's never really happened for the presidents or senator, the party of that primaried governor or senator usually loses the election. So I think that really, if Democrats had lost the Rhode Island primary this week, or if McKee had lost the primary this week, I think the Democrats might be in a harsher situation. Yeah, but if Alan Fung had ran for this seat, I think that I could see this race being lean, but, I don't know how strong the Republican candidate in Rhode Island is, but it will be an interesting race to watch. So yeah, that is it for the well, nah, it's not the end of the likely states, but for those two it is. Minnesota is the next likely state. Tim Walz is in a very good position against Scott Jensen. He's been leading over him by almost 20 percentage points, and I don't think that that's going to happen in 28 in this year. I think Walz will win re-election. This was a state that could have been a sleeper flip for the Republicans, and I don't think that the Legal Weed Party is going to have too much of an effect. I think that Walz will win right now by 7 or 8 percentage points, maybe 6 or 5. I don't know, but it's going to be over the likely. It's going to be in the likely column, in my opinion. If there is enough vote splitting between Walz and the illegal weed candidates, maybe this race gets a little bit more competitive. But it seems like Minnesota, is a state that's locked down for Tim Walz. It really doesn't seem like Scott Jensen has the same appeal that he did just a couple of months ago. That being said, it isn't going to be a double-digit victory or a 15-point margin of victory either. The next likely state I have, the state of Michigan. Gretchen Whitmer is in a very good position for re-election against Tudor Dixon, an awful candidate. In a best-case scenario, I could see Dixon winning, but we are not working with that. The environment has gotten a lot more hospitable to Democrats. I think that Whitmer was, is a very vulnerable incumbent, but because of her opponent, who is very pro-life in a state that is very pro-choice and has an abortion referendum on the ballot, that's going to help Whitmer and the Democrats. Michigan is a state that, just like Pennsylvania, Republicans have screwed up in this year. They primaried out Peter Meyer. They put in John Gibbs, who's probably going to lose that House race. They just have not been having a good year in Michigan. So I don't think that Michigan's going to go overwhelmingly to Gretchen Whitmer. I think she's going to win by 6 or 7 percentage points, similar to it'll be a little bit smaller than her margin in 2018. But I just think Tudor Dixon's just such a bad candidate that I just don't see her being able to get this race even below 5%. Trafalgar even has her down by 4, and they predicted Trump would win Michigan in 2020. So I don't see it. Michigan's not a state where the polling is grossly inaccurate. There would need to be a huge polling error for Michigan to be, so terribly wrong. The next likely state that we got is the state of New Mexico. This is a jump up from last time, I believe. I don't believe I had New Mexico in the yeah, I had it in the lean column for a long time. This is the first time I have it in the likely column. It does seem like the Michelle Lujan Grisham is benefiting from, the Roe effect, and also from the fact that there is a libertarian taking away votes from Mark Ronchetti. I saw an article in the Post the other day that was talking about how Ron Shetty is trying to backtrack his position on abortion, which I don't think a lot of voters are buying because as we saw in New York's special election, Mark Molinaro pointed out that abortion rights would be protected, in a state so blue as New York. But Pat Ryan won that race, and so I think that Mark Ronchetti, while this could have been a potential pickup opportunity for Republicans, and I think it still could be if things get better for them, I think Lujan Grisham's in a pretty good spot right now, and I think she'll win by a little bit over 5%. Her scandals I don't think are going to matter as much as some may say. Another jump up from lean to likely is the state of Pennsylvania. Josh Shapiro does seem to be doing a lot better against Doug Mastriano. Democrats are really doing well in Pennsylvania. I know I said that this race could, Mastriano could have an upset victory, and I still think he could, but considering how badly he's doing in the polling data, I mean, now Josh Shapiro is actually outperforming John Fetterman. Wasn't that way for a while. Trafalgar has, which had Trump winning Pennsylvania in 2020, has Shapiro up by 2. This race could still be lean, but I think Shapiro, is going to win by about 5 percentage points. Real Clear Politics average in 2020 was very accurate, and they have Shapiro up by 5 points. So I think that, this race is going to be a fairly solid win for the Democratic Party. Josh Shapiro is an overperformer, and I just don't see Mastriano being able to combat the amount of support Shapiro gets in the urban areas, even if Mastriano can do better than Dr. Oz in the rural areas. Now we're going to go into the likely Republican states. First one we have is Alaska. I have seen a lot of people putting this race, towards Bill Walker, and I think it could go to Bill Walker, but, I think that Mike Dunleavy is a strong enough. I mean, I don't know if I would say he's a strong incumbent. Alaska is not a fan of its incumbent governors, but I will say that with Alaska's given Republican lean, I think that and there being a split anti-Dunleavy vote, I think that is going to help. Mike Dunleavy. I know that Alaska uses ranked choice voting, and if Dunleavy does struggle to get over 50% on election day, we could see an interesting race here between him and Walker. I do think it is possible that Republicans lose Alaska's governor election, just like they lost the House election. But Dunleavy is not nearly as controversial as a Sarah Palin was, and we're going to have an interesting Senate race between Murkowski and Shabaka, which seems to be getting really close. The next likely state, this is a change from last time, is South Carolina. Henry McMaster is still favored to win, but Joe Cunningham does seem to be narrowing up the race. There have been some polls out that show him doing slightly better than he was before. I don't think he's going to lose by over 15. Yeah, so he is doing quite well. Yeah, this internal poll showed him down, sorry, by 7 points. I think it'll be close to safe, but I think it'll be double digits. But even Trafalgar has McMaster only up by 8 points, so I think that, Henry McMaster will win this race. Not a doubt in my mind. South Carolina is a very red state. But I think that Joe Cunningham can get it under 15%. The last likely state actually we have is the state of Florida. Ron DeSantis does seem to be struggling with his approval ratings and in recent polling, but he is still very, he has really turned Florida into a Republican-leaning swing state instead of a toss-up state. And, I guess you can credit Trump with that, but I do think that Ron DeSantis is a serious presidential contender in 2024. I think most people believe that. And while Charlie Crist is a good candidate, he just has not had his luck. He's not been lucky in recent elections, and I just don't see Florida being able to, I think Marco Rubio on the ballot will help DeSantis, but I do think that DeSantis's win is going, the governor election is going to be more lopsided for Republicans than the Senate race. I think Val Demings, will be able to appeal more to minorities, and I think DeSantis does have a good appeal with Hispanics, so I just don't see Charlie Crist being able to come too close, but I do think he will do better than expected. I don't think that this race is going to be double digits for DeSantis. Right now, 538 has DeSantis up by 6. I think he'll win by around there, maybe 7 or 8 or 9 points, but I think, it'll be the high single digits, but I don't think it's going to be, a terribly large or close margin for DeSantis. So, yeah, that's it for all the likely states. You may be surprised to see one likely state for the Republicans not be on there this time. Yeah, so I guess we'll reveal that state right now if you haven't already figured it out. We're going to go into the lean states now, which are going to go to either party by over 15 percentage point, or what am I saying? They're going to go to either party by 1 to 5 percentage points. These are more competitive elections. They are not quite toss-ups. Some of them I would characterize as toss-ups, or, they can be characterized as toss-ups, but I think that all of these states do have a pretty good lean either way. And yeah, we're going to start off with the lean Republican states. Texas, I'm moving down the lean. And the reason I do that is not necessarily because I think that Beto O'Rourke is wildly improving with his polling, but he is getting fairly close. I will say that, Echelon Insights, which does seem to have put up pretty favorable numbers for the Democrats recently, only has O'Rourke down by 2. But when you look at some of these other pollsters and other polls, they were conducted by pollsters that underestimated O'Rourke in 2018 against Ted Cruz. And so, Greg Abbott's up right now by 7 points. I think that that's quite reasonable. And I'm debating. Maybe I will put it back in likely, but Texas is a state that I think will be fairly narrow. I think O'Rourke really does have an appeal to Hispanics that Democrats are struggling with, but I also think he can peel off some Republican votes, especially some pro-choice Republican women. And I think that Abbott, is a lot more polarizing than he was in 2018. He was overestimated in that governor election that year. He was supposed to win by a safe margin. He only won by 13. I mean, not only won, but he won by a likely margin. So I do think that Beto O'Rourke, could still lose by a likely margin, and I don't think, he's going to win. He could win in a best case scenario, but it would take a lot for him to be able to come out on top on against Greg Abbott. But I do think Democrats will come fairly close in Texas, a state that's been becoming more and more competitive and is, trending to the left at a significant rate. And I do think that Beto O'Rourke has been underestimated in the past. So I do think that Texas will go Republican by about 4.5 percentage points. Will be a lot closer to likely than it is to tilt or toss up. The other lean Republican state is Georgia. I'm keeping strong with Georgia. I know that it's not necessarily a ticket splitting state, but when you look at, the 2016 elections, and yes, this was back when Georgia was a lot less diverse, Trump only won the state by 5 points, while Johnny Isaacson won the Senate election by 14 points. Isaacson, yes, was an overperformer, but Brian Kemp is a very strong candidate. He can get rural turnout that, Trump was not able to get. Republicans down ballot in 2020 in the House elections won the popular vote in Georgia by 2 points, whereas, Trump lost the state to Biden. And I do think that Stacey Abrams is going to get good black turnout. I think that, she has an underrated chance at winning this Senate race, or not Senate race, governor's race. But I also just think that, the problem for her is that there are a lot of black men in Georgia, black male voters who are just, not quite as willing to vote for a black woman as they would for a black man. That's why you might be seeing Raphael Warnock doing well, doing a lot better than Stacey Abrams in Georgia. And the polls in the state are very accurate. They were very accurate in the Senate runoffs in 2020 and 2021. They were very accurate in the presidential race. And, while I think Stacey Abrams did lead in one poll against Kemp recently, I think that this is a reasonable margin by 538 that, according to the polling average, that he's up by four. Yeah, there was one poll that was conducted by Center Street PAC, which showed Abrams up. Actually, there was two. So, okay, so, Abrams has now led in a poll. But the thing about that is that in 2018, she and Kemp were neck and neck in polling, and I just don't see her being able to have the same appeal that she did in 2018. She does have more favorable demographics. I think that this race would have been a lot more attainable for her, though, if Brian Kemp had lost the GOP nomination to David Perdue. Then I could have seen this race being a lot closer. So yeah, so I think Georgia's going to go for Kemp by about 4 points. I know Georgia isn't necessarily a ticket splitting state, but at the same time, the polls are very accurate. They show Warnock up and they show Kemp up. So, who knows? I think that there's just going to be a bit of a divergence in the results from the Senate race with Warnock and Walker and the governor's race with Abrams and Kemp. So now we'll go into the two lean states for the Democrats. The first is Oregon, which is a vulnerable seat for Democrats. Tina Kotek is not the best candidate, and I think that she, reminds voters a lot of Kate Brown, who's very unpopular in the state, the current Democratic governor, who is term limited and retiring. And there is, the independent in the race, Betsy Johnson, is going to siphon off a lot of votes from Kotek in a state that already has surprisingly competitive elections. I think Christine Drazen has a pretty good chance at flipping Oregon red, even with a national environment that is getting so much better for Democrats. But I still think that Oregon is going to stay blue. I think that Kotek will win by 3 or 4 points at the end of the day, and Oregon will narrowly stay blue. Next state, the other lean state, is the state of Maine. In Maine, Paul LePage is coming back to take on Janet Mills. The problem for LePage, though, and I've said this before, is that he was not able to win a majority of the vote in either of his elections. Even in 2014, in a red wave year, he was not able to crack 50% against Michael McCaul. And, I think that, considering LePage is very unpopular, his level of disapproval in his second term in office and his, extremism, I think that a lot of Maine voters they're going to remember that, and I think that they are going to reject him once again, especially since Janet Mills is working with ranked choice voting in the state of Maine, and also the fact that, she was able to win a majority of the vote in 2018 when an independent was on the ballot. So I think that that shows that Janet Mills is, an underrated candidate, but I do think, she is not super inspiring, and I think that LePage can take advantage of that. He is a better candidate than most of the candidates than a lot of the other candidates the Republicans have put up in some of these governor and Senate races. But I also think that he does have a lot of baggage to him, especially with his history of controversial statements and comments. So now we're down to the last four states. These are the true toss-up states. These are the tilt states that are going to go into either party by less than 1 percentage point. So we're going to get right into it. The first tilt state I have is Wisconsin. Not a big surprise here. I think Tim Michels is going to take advantage of Tony Evers' lackluster candidacy. Evers was up against Scott Walker, who was a strong candidate in 2018, but Walker was very unpopular, and this was a blue wave year. Evers should have won by more. The polls were pretty accurate in Wisconsin in 2018, but considering that the national environment is a lot redder, I just don't see Evers being able to win. I can see him winning. It's not a foregone conclusion, but I think right now he loses narrowly to Tim Michels. I think Michels is a worse candidate than Rebecca Kleefich would have been. But I just don't think, that Evers is going to be able to take. I don't think that the overturning of Roe is going to be enough for Evers to, take advantage of and win a second term in the state of Wisconsin. I could see it. Michels is not the best candidate, but he is no Doug Mastriano or Tudor Dixon or Kerry Lake. and Evers is only up by 2 points in the polls in a state that usually overestimates Democratic support. Midterm polls in Wisconsin are a lot more accurate than they are in presidential years. And and it does look like that Evers is outperforming Mandela Barnes now, which that was a different story last time we were talking about these races. But I also think that Evers' appeal to black voters in Milwaukee is a lot worse than Barnes, and I think that given Wisconsin's trends is trending Republican, I just don't think that Evers is favored right now, but he could win. It's not a done deal for Democrats in Wisconsin in the Senate race or the governor's race. These are two very close states, and they are going to be toss-ups all the way through to the end. The next tilt state I'm going to give to Democrats is Nevada. I'm moving this back down to tilt. Joe Lombardo does seem to be outperforming Adam Laxalt. I think Sisolak in this race he is underperforming Cortez Masto for a reason, and that's because he does not have the same kind of appeal that she does in Clark County. Yes, he did win it by 14 points in 2018, a blue wave year. The county, I mean, he won the race by 4 points. But I do think that Nevada is a state that is getting a lot closer. It has been very close for most of my predictions. I've had Sisolak favored throughout the entirety of my governor prediction history, but I do think that it is getting narrow, and Lombardo does have a lot more appeal, I think, than Adam Laxalt does in the state in terms of the suburban areas in Clark County. And so I do think that I think we could see a Lombardo victory. Nevada does have a tendency to underestimate Democrats in polling, and there are a lot of undecideds in some of these polls, but, I think that Sisolak is in a little bit of trouble in the state of Nevada, but I do think he's going to get enough turnout thanks to the overturning of Roe to put him over the finish line, and I think that Democrats are going to have a lackluster year in Nevada, but I still think that they're going to win the governor and Senate races, but they are very close and they really could go either way. The last two states, I'm going to give Arizona to Katie Hobbs. Her not decision not to debate Carrie Lake was a big mistake, in my opinion. I'm, not very happy considering that, I'm a liberal and I support Katie Hobbs over Carrie Lake. I do think that Lake does have a lot more appeal than Blake Masters does, and Arizona is a ticket splitting state. Contrary to what right wingers would tell you, Arizona voted for Doug Ducey in 2018 by almost 15 points while voting for Kirsten Sinema for the Senate election. So I think we could see a result where Mark Kelly wins his Senate race against Blake Masters, but Carrie Lake becomes the next governor of Arizona. I think Katie Hobbs does not have the same kind of moderate appeal that Kelly does in the Phoenix suburbs and Maricopa County. And I do think that, it is going to be a lot harder for her considering, her decision not to debate Blake. And, I think that there's a good chance that this race, that I put this back in the Republican column. I think that, we're just going to have to wait for a little bit more polling data. The polling data that we've gotten recently does suggest a fairly good margin for Hobbs. She's up by 3 points, but she is underperforming Mark Kelly pretty substantially. Oh, look, this is a new poll. Lake's up by 4 points in Trafalgar's poll, but they did overestimate Republicans in the state of Arizona. In 2018 and 2020, they said Trump would win the state. So you know what? I don't know. Considering I haven't seen this poll, this just came out. I checked this right before I started the video, but I didn't see this poll. But considering the rest of these polls that show Hobbs doing a little bit better, I think that Hobbs barely ekes it out as of right now. I don't know. I don't know. I'm kind of considering after that poll to move this back into the Republican column, but I think right now I'm going to keep it in. I don't know. This is a really hard call in Arizona. Like Arizona, this is what I mean. These four states are really, really close. They really could go either way. I think though Arizona is a state that's going to well, I don't know. I mean, Lake is up by more than Trump was in that poll, in that last Trafalgar poll in Arizona in 2020, so I don't know. I'm really, really conflicted. You know what? It's one poll. Let's wait for more polling data. I'm gonna keep Arizona in the tilt blue column. I think Hobbs nearly ekes it out against Kerry Lake as of right now. Um, and finally, in the state of Kansas, I think I am going to put this back in the Republican column. I know this is the same map as LTE, but there are some differences, in terms of the margin, so don't call me an LTE copycat. I do watch his videos, and he does influence my predictions, but I have my own opinion. So my opinion about Kansas is similar to what LTE said in his video, that the abortion referendum, with abortion having been protected during the referendum, that may not have as good of an effect on Laura Kelly as we previously thought. And I've also looked at the election shuffler and just how much support Kelly would need that to put her over the finish line. So I think that the race does come down to the wire. It's completely a total toss up still, but I think Derek Schmidt not being Chris Kobach is going to give him a very narrow victory. I think Kelly can win, especially with the independent Dennis Pyle on the ballot, which will split the who will split the vote with Schmidt. But I do think that given Kansas's partisan lean and the fact that Kelly does not have the same kind of factors that benefited her in 2018, I think that she barely loses. I could be proven wrong though. She was underestimated in 2018. It was pretty much a dead toss up at that point by election day in 2018, and she won by 5. So I could be wrong, but I think right now, given Kansas's national normal Republican lean, and the fact that it's not a blue wave year, at least not yet. I mean, I don't think it's going to be, but the situation is getting better for Democrats. So I think right now Derek Schmidt nearly takes back the governorship in Kansas for the Republicans. So on the final map, we have Republicans at 27 governorships in the National Governors Association to Democrats' 23 governorships. Republicans flip Wisconsin and Kansas, but Democrats flip Arizona, Massachusetts, and Maryland. And yeah, Democrats have an net a gain of 1 seat in the National Governors Association. So yeah, and that is it. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, share it, turn on notifications so you don't miss another one of my videos. If you disagree with any of these calls, be sure to let me know in the comments down below, but keep it civil, please. Do not, turn the comments section into a war zone. And yeah, check out my non-political channel, Interactor127, and my comrade, GrowlingZoo666. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time when I talk about all things politics. See ya.